Welcome back, everyone. Going to be continuing our official review of Dr. Jordan B. Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. That glare is really bad. There we go. 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote to Chaos. And we will be reviewing and summarizing Chapter 6, or Rule 6. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. If I could briefly, in a sentence or two, sum up this chapter, and first off, to really describe the theme, the tone of the chapter, it's heavy. It's a heavy chapter. It's one of, I would say, if not the heaviest chapter in the book. Now, it's also one of the shortest chapters in the book, thankfully, right? But it's rough. It's a rough read. It's kind of depressing. It's true, but it's kind of sad. And I'll read through it and I'll summarize, and you'll see why at the end of this video. I'm going to start off, well, first let me go ahead and give a general overview, a summary of the chapter. Like I said, I would sum up this chapter as this is Jordan's observation that life is suffering, and that's what we do as human beings on this earth. It's what we do with our time. And he asks and addresses the question, what, if anything, can be done about that? What, if anything, can we do about that? What are our options? And he points out a few options in the chapter. For example, we can retreat into nihilism and say to ourselves that life is meaningless, nothing matters, it's all evil and despair and malevolence all around us. Let's just give up. Pursue meaningless pleasure, right? Because none of this means anything. The second option that he lays out, I would say, is really what the chapter is about. What's the alternative option to that? What else can we do besides retreating into nihilism and throwing our hands up and giving up? So I'm going to start off with the very first section, how Jordan himself starts the chapter, and I'm going to quote him here. A religious problem. It doesn't seem reasonable to describe the young man who shot 20 children and 6 staff members at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut in 2012 as a religious person. This is equally true for the Colorado theater gunman and the Columbine high school killers. But these murderous individuals had a problem with reality that existed at a religious depth. As one of the members of the Columbine duo wrote, the human race isn't worth fighting for, only worth killing. Give the earth back to the animals. They deserve it infinitely more than we do. Nothing means anything anymore. People who think such things view being itself as inequitable and harsh to the point of corruption, and human being, in particular, as contemptible. They appoint themselves supreme adjudicators of reality and find it wanting. They are the ultimate critics. The deeply cynical writer continues. If you recall your history, the Nazis came up with a final solution to the Jewish problem. Kill them all. Well, in case you haven't figured it out, I say kill mankind. No one should survive. For such individuals, the world of experience is insufficient and evil, so to hell with everything. And that sets the tone for the rest of this chapter. Like I said, it's a heavy chapter. He gives a lot of examples in this chapter of people, both fictional and people who have existed in the past, or people who are still alive today, who have been through unimaginable horrors in life. He's giving the more extreme examples of suffering that people have gone through throughout the course of human history. Of course, people today still suffer. Not quite to the extent of the people in these examples that he gives, but people still suffer today. We all suffer in our daily lives, of course. I'm going to try and find an example here. He talks about Soviet prison camps, the gulags. Here's an example here, and this is about Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Alexander Solzhenitsyn had every reason to question the structure of existence when he was imprisoned in a Soviet labor camp in the middle of the terrible 20th century. He had served as a soldier on the ill-prepared Russian front lines in the face of a Nazi invasion. He'd been arrested, beaten, and thrown into prison by his own people. Then he was struck by cancer. Now he could have become resentful and bitter. His life had been rendered miserable by both Stalin and Hitler, two of the worst tyrants in history. He lived in brutal conditions. Vast stretches of his precious time were stolen from him and squandered. He witnessed the pointless and degrading suffering and death of his friends and acquaintances. Then he contracted an extremely serious disease. Solzhenitsyn had cause to curse God. Job himself barely had it as hard. But the great writer, the profound, spirited defender of truth, didn't allow his mind to turn towards vengeance and destruction. He opened his eyes instead. During his many trials, Solzhenitsyn encountered people who comported themselves nobly under horrific circumstances. He contemplated their behavior deeply. And then he asked himself the most difficult of questions. Had he personally contributed to the catastrophe of his life? And if so, how? He remembered his unquestioning support of the Communist Party in his early years. He reconsidered his whole life. He had plenty of time in the camps. How had he missed the mark in the past? How many times had he acted against his own conscience, engaging in actions that he knew to be wrong? How many times had he betrayed himself and lied? Was there any way that the sins of his past could be rectified, atoned for, in the muddy hell of the Soviet Gulag? Solzhenitsyn pored over the details of his life with a fine-toothed comb. He asked himself a second question, and a third. Can I stop making such mistakes now? Can I repair the damage done by my past failures now? He learned to watch and to listen. He found people he admired who were honest, despite everything. He took himself apart, piece by piece, let what was unnecessary and harmful die, and resurrected himself. And then he wrote The Gulag Archipelago, a history of the Soviet prison camp system. It's a forceful, terrible book written with the overwhelming moral force of unvarnished truth. Its sheer outrage screamed unbearably across hundreds of pages. Banned, and for good reason, in the USSR, it was smuggled to the West in the 1970s and burst upon the world. Solzhenitsyn's writing utterly and finally demolished the intellectual credibility of communism as ideology or society. He took an axe to the trunk of the tree whose bitter fruits had nourished him so poorly, and whose planting he had witnessed and supported. He uses a lot of these powerful examples throughout the chapter to really solidify and reinforce the point that he's making here. So most of the chapter is the point he's making of the suffering attendant upon life, upon being itself, and how he says somewhere in the chapter it's something like how we're all slated for despair and death. So that really gives you a good idea of what the chapter is like. Now I'm going to skip to the end here, because we're nearly to the end, because like I said, it's a rather short chapter, and I'm going to read the last part of his very last section here in the chapter called Clean Up Your Life. Consider your circumstances and start small. Have you taken full advantage of the opportunities offered to you? Are you working hard on your career, or even your job? Or are you letting bitterness and resentment hold you back and drag you down? Have you made peace with your brother? Are you treating your spouse and your children with dignity and respect? Do you have habits that are destroying your health and well-being? Are you truly shouldering your responsibilities? Have you said what you need to say to your friends and family members? Are there things that you could do, that you know you could do, that would make things around you better? Have you cleaned up your life? If the answer is no, here's something to try. Start to stop doing what you know to be wrong. Start stopping today. Don't waste time questioning how you know that what you're doing is wrong if you're certain that it is. Inopportune questioning can confuse without enlightening, as well as deflecting you from action. You can know that something is wrong or right without knowing why. Your entire being can tell you something that you can neither explain nor articulate. Every person is too complex to know themselves completely, and we all contain wisdom that we cannot comprehend. So, simply stop when you apprehend, however dimly, that you should stop. Stop acting in that particular despicable manner. Stop saying those things that make you weak and ashamed. Say only those things that make you strong. Do only those things that you could speak of with honor. Perhaps you'll discover that your now less corrupted soul, much stronger than it might otherwise have been, is now able to bear those remaining, necessary, minimal, inescapable tragedies. Perhaps you'll even learn to encounter them so that they stay tragic, merely tragic, instead of degenerating into outright hellishness. Maybe your anxiety and hopelessness and resentment and anger, however murderous initially, will recede. Perhaps your uncorrupted soul will then see its existence as a genuine good, as something to celebrate, even in the face of your own vulnerability. Perhaps you'll become an ever more powerful force for peace and whatever is good. Perhaps you'll then see that if all people did this in their own lives, the world might stop being an evil place. After that, with continued effort, or perhaps it could even stop being a tragic place. Who knows what existence might be like if we all decided to strive for the best? Who knows what eternal heavens might be established by our spirits, purified by truth, aiming skyward, right here on the fallen earth. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world.